Hello, my name is Becky and today we're going to be discussing Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. To quickly summarise what the book is about, this is the third book in the Folk of the Air trilogy, or the Cruel Prince trilogy as it's kind of more well known. In this book we are still following Jude and her mission to become High Queen as of sort. She is still exiled at the beginning, but very quickly we get thrown back into the world of fairy when she goes to pretend to be her sister Taryn after Taryn murders her husband. After that everything sort of takes off and then we get into the war business, and I can only summarise it as stressful. I don't have notes for this. I did that on my phone, and my phone is what's filming this video. However, I was planning on just keeping this short anyway because people don't want to watch me talk forever. I will start by saying that I went into this book expecting it to be like at most a 4-star, possibly a 3-star. The first two weren't my favourite books. I didn't particularly like the first one. I actually only read the second one because I was going to see Holly Black at the signing and I just assumed I was going to really like both books. So I read the first one. I was like, well, I have to read the second one now. If I hadn't been going to see her, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. But I'm glad I did because I did really enjoy the second one. Not like a 5-star read. I think I gave it 4 stars and then that was good enough, thankfully, for me to then continue with the series. I just wasn't expecting it to be like a top-notch brilliant 5-star book for me, and we'll get into more of that in a minute. I think how I'm gonna do this is in sections. I was gonna do like pros and cons because I had enough cons to talk about both, but instead I think we're gonna do like characters, plot, world building, writing, as I did with Call Down the Hawk. I'll put this down because you know what it looks like now. I don't I'm not going to hold it the whole time. So as far as the characters go, I only chose to speak about 2. Overall, I kind of tend to choose like the main characters, the ones who have enough focus on them to have a good discussion about them. And really, in this series, all you can do that with is Jude and Cardan. So focusing more on that in a second and focusing just on Jude and Cardan for now. Let's start with Jude, I think, as she is our main lady. Jude, I didn't really like throughout the first few books. Like, I didn't dislike her. I just didn't really like her because I struggled to understand her motives a lot. She wasn't very relatable for me, and she was just, I couldn't understand any of her, and it made it really difficult to care about what she did or what became of her because it was a struggle to understand why she was doing things and even what she was feeling. Those are, of course, all writing things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. However, in this book, I did like Jude more. Again, from a writing perspective, it felt like she was less robotic in this book. Also, I understood her motives for once. The first 2 books I had no clue what she was doing when and why she was doing it, but in this book I understood. One thing I do like about Jude is that she is definitely a morally grey character, and that just makes everything 10 times more interesting, especially with her being like the main protagonist. I think the bit in the story with Jude that made me kind of think this is good, like I like her as a character, was when Cardan was in his snaky form and she was planning on binding him to her, and she had this whole moment where she was talking about just sitting on the throne and letting Elfhame slowly go to ruin, but it's okay because she has the snake by her side and like grief in her heart or whatever. And at that moment I was like, you're cool. Because that kind of thing is just so much more fun in characters than when you get necessarily like the good thing that you expect them to do. I was very sad about it, I was very stressed about it, but seeing her make a decision that wasn't necessarily the good or the right decision was definitely something different and something interesting that I'm hoping we're starting to finally see more of in like young adult fantasy. Am I glad she didn't follow through with it? Yes, to be fair, but the fact that we saw that side of her and this darker side of her, I thought was like really good. So I do stand by saying that Jude is absolutely bonkers because she is. She is insane in every form of the word. She just really, she's scary, I think, at times, Jude. She scares Cardan, to be fair. Like, part of her character is her being very, very frightening. But just some of the things she does, like in book 1 when she was poisoning herself and stabbing herself through the hand, and just, she just is willing to do far too much to get that throne. Like, it goes beyond what's normal. That is one of the reasons why I struggled to understand her motives at the beginning, because she was doing all these crazy things to herself and I was just sat there like, why do you even care? Like, it was never particularly explained beyond, oh, I've had a hard life here and I want to change that. Like, there wasn't much fueling it. But as the stories continued, and especially in this one when her motivations are very much like front, like, you know what's going on, you know what she's fighting for, it did make everything else make sense. Yeah, I just think she's cool. Moving on to Cardan swiftly. Cardan, I didn't like him in book 1. Just because he was horrible in book 1. I remember going into it and everybody was like, you'll fall in love with Cardan Greenbrier. And then I started reading it and was like, oh my god, this guy's an absolute arse. Why does everybody like him so much? And then in book 2, he kind of got better. Like, you started to see a different side to him that you didn't see in book 1. You know, more comes out about his character. He gains layers, which is great because so many of the, like, bad boy characters are just really one-sided. And so for him to kind of break out of that and gain a personality, it was quite nice to see. And then in book 3, I thought he just got better again. I've heard a lot of people say the opposite, that they thought he was great in the first book and then by the last book he'd gone like vanilla. Personally, I think he was better towards the end of the series, but I suppose that literally comes down to personal preference of what you like in a character. But as much as you definitely saw him kind of grow as a person and grow into the throne, which was good, he also kind of kept himself in it, so he still had like his humour and like that mischievous attitude to him. Like, all of that was still there, but you just got to see a better side to him and a more mature side of him, I think, especially with the talk about how he had grown into the throne and finally kind of taken upon his role of king. You got to see like a more mature side of Cardan, which I liked. To quickly talk about the snake, that honestly, from chapter 22 to like 26, the most stressful few chapters of my life. What an emotional roller coaster. I cried when she chopped the head of the snake off. It wasn't a good time for me. But I think what was surprising about that is that because I hadn't really expected at all to really care about Cardan as a character because of how he was in the first book, when I found myself in the last book, like, actually crying when his head was chopped off, I was just like, huh. I kind of call him like my guilty pleasure love interest, as in like, if I was to list off my favourite fictional characters, or like fictional characters I would marry, or fictional crushes, Cardan Greenbrier probably wouldn't make the list, just because the man has a tail. I can't put that on my list. That's why he's kind of like a guilty pleasure love interest, because I'd still die for him, I just wouldn't admit it. A final point though to make about Cardan is that while I was making notes about this book as I was reading it, I had a subsection called Fashion Choices Cardan Has Made, which felt very important and I still think is very important. I don't have the list with me because it's on my phone, but I can tell you that some of the highlights included thigh-high boots, not knee-high boots, thigh-high boots, because I actually had to correct myself. I was like, oh, knee-high boots, and then it continued and I was like, oh no, thigh-high boots. Golden tips on his ears, which I think is cool. That's some fun jewellery I'm there for. I believe he also wears earrings as well, which like... And also, the note literally just said, free the tail on my phone, because very quickly from when we were reintroduced with Cardan, it's made clear straight away that, oh, he just has his tail out all the time now. How I feel about that, I couldn't tell you. Do I think he should hide it? No, it's his. Am I happy it's there? No. No, I'm not. Especially not in that scene in chapter 21 where it would just really pull you out of the moment and be like, his tail, like, no, not there for that. I think the only people who got something out of that were the furries. Everybody else just... no. Other things on this list of Cardan's fashion choices included some quotes from Jude involving what she thinks about his choice, including words like ridiculous fashion sense, which I think makes perfect sense from some of the things that he's described to be wearing that always include very large furry cloaks, it seems. She also once said that his fashion choice is extravagant enough for both of them. Again, fully agree. And yeah, I just felt Cardan's fashion deserved a moment to be discussed because it's amazing. To speak about the other characters in the series, one thing that I found throughout the entire series is that they never particularly matter, to be honest. Like, you have so many side characters, and what do any of them really do that's relevant to the main plotline? They all have their own subplots going on, but the story would be exactly the same if those subplots didn't exist, like 90% of the time. And that was something that I thought was really prominent in this book, especially because a lot of characters who were side characters but like prominent ones in The Wicked King were just dumped. In this, all I can think is that they were no longer relevant, they were no longer useful, even though a lot of them still aren't useful and still had a place in the book. Instead of like trying to make them useful, it seems like they were just shoved aside. For instance, you know, Locke died off page. We didn't even see him in the second book. Nicasia showed up like briefly, like once, I think. She wasn't a problem like I think people expect her to be. She just wasn't there, and neither was her mother. the Queen of the Undersea. She didn't show up once. She just wasn't there. And they had to make excuse like, oh, she's injured. You know, like they were setting up for this massive war and things in book 2, and I was like, oh, something big's gonna happen with her. She's gonna be a big villain. And then she just didn't show up for the entire story. Even the side characters that are presented as like worth something to the plot line kind of aren't. You know, you have Jude's family, basically. Oak, of course, he's relevant to the plot line because he's like the Greenbrier line or whatever. But then there's like Vivian, and there's Taryn, and then there's Heather as well. What does any of them, you know, Taryn, I suppose, was useful in the way of she murdered her husband. But other than that, what she needed? No. And it's the same with, you know, Vivi. Was she needed? No. Was Heather doing anything relevant other than their subplot at the side? No. And as much as I liked seeing their individual subplots, it would have made all of those side characters much more interesting if they'd been more involved in the actual plot, rather than just kind of showing up on the side to be like, we're having relationship drama, and then just disappearing again for like 5 chapters. I think the only thing that I can think of that they truly did when they showed up to rescue Jude from the camp, and even then they had like a new side character with them, that weird lady from one of the other courts, who just kind of appeared and then did everything. And yeah, I feel like there's a lot of side characters and none of them are particularly useful, and it's a shame because I would like to see them do something of use. Even the Roach wasn't really in this book, which I thought was quite surprising. I was expecting to see more of the Bomb and the Roach, and we did see like a good amount of the Bomb, but the Roach, like, he showed up at the beginning with Cardan, then he disappeared for the whole book because he was dying, then he was at the end. That was his only input in the entire storyline. And it is frustrating to have these characters and think, you know, you could do something with these people, and then just nothing comes of it. And that kind of leads on to my other point about the characters, is that some of the side ones never really seem to get like an actual ending. I found in this book a lot of things were left loose. You know, we had that pizza party or whatever it was at the end, and you saw Heather and Vivian back together, and it seemed like they were sorting things out. So I was like kind of happy with that. I was like, okay, it seems like they're gonna sort things out. But then there was Taryn, who was just kind of like, well, I guess I'm a widow now with a baby on the way, and I've got all of these places, so I guess I'll just go live there. And everybody was like, yeah. But then it's okay, because you get those bits where the ghost like side-eyes her as if it's hinting at something, but then nothing came of that either. It was frustrating. I think that was the most frustrating thing in this book for me. I just couldn't care about any of the side characters because they didn't do enough for me to care about them. You didn't see them often enough to care about them, and you know, that is a bit of a shame, really. So really, in this book, the only characters that were in any way of use to me were just Jude and Cardan, because everyone else, it was like, okay, why are you here? Like Maddox, yeah, because he's like the villain, but everyone else just okay. So going on to the plot, this is a good point. I will say that the plot of this book was my favourite out of all of them for a few reasons, mainly because I understood what was going on. I don't enjoy plots that jump around all over the place and expect you to understand all these different schemes and things going on, because that's not how my brain processes information. I need things to be quite kind of straightforward for my brain to take it in. So The Wicked King was a really difficult book for me to read. I couldn't sit here now and tell you what happened in The Wicked King, other than Cardan was briefly bound to Jude. And I couldn't have told you what had happened in it like the day after I finished reading it. I probably couldn't have told you what happened in it whilst I was reading it, because it was just confusing. The plot of this, however, I understood it better because we were kind of following a routine. There was things happening one after the other that made sense. I will say the second part of the book was definitely better than the first. I had problems with the first half. It was kind of going the exact same way as the other two had writing-wise, and I was like, oh, I can't do this again. When we hit like the second half and then like Cardan turned into a snake, that was when it got good for me. That was the bit when I was like, oh, we're like actually getting in gear for once, we're doing something. And that really took off. If the first half had been as good as the second half had been, it probably would have been a 5-star read for me. But because that first half kind of flopped, it didn't get there. Really, the only prominent thing in my mind from this book is those few chapters where Cardan was a snake, because everything happened and I was so stressed. I had a stress headache for like 2 days trying to read it. I actually couldn't pick it up at one point because I just knew the stress it was going to put me under, so I just like left it for a day. Yeah, it was just so much for my tiny little brain. I do think from a writing perspective, it would have been interesting to see Jude, Cardan, or both of them die. I think that would have been an interesting spin. Am I glad that it didn't happen? Yes, because as much as it would have been good from a writing perspective, it wouldn't have been good for my emotional state. So yeah, I do think most of my favourite scenes did revolve around Cardan the snake, especially the scenes where he was in the castle and Jude was sat with him just with this massive snake. I thought all of that was really good. I thought as much as it hurt me, it was good scenes, and it didn't almost make me cry several times, and I did cry when she chopped off the snake's head. I don't think I have too much to say though about the plot, mainly because I enjoyed the plot. And I think when you enjoy something, it's more difficult to speak about it. So moving on, world building. World building I'm not going to talk about for too long, because I think it's kind of something that everybody agrees with who's read these books, which is that the world building isn't really there. All that's kind of presented is, this is Elfhame, we're away from the mortal world, and we have our own courts, and we have a leader. Yeah. The struggles I had with it were mainly to do with the characters and the way that Holly kind of assumes that you already know these people. So throughout the book, you'll hear descriptions where Jude will be like, and over there's a Kelpie, or she'll be like, oh, this person who I just met, who is, name another type of mythical creature, and you're expected just to know, like, you don't get a description of this mythical creature, it's just, that's a Kelpie. So then I'm googling, like, what the hell is a Kelpie? Because if you don't know, that's it. What this person looks like, I've got no clue. You're kind of supposed to know, but like, unless you're like really good at this fairy thing and you read loads of fairy books, you're not gonna know. However, on the flip side of that, when you are given the descriptions of characters, they're incredibly complicated, and it just meant that for the entire series, I didn't know what anybody looked like. I could tell you what the human-y people look like Jude and Cardan and Jude's family, and even like Madoc and Oriana, but everybody else, what were they supposed to look like? The bomb I had down, the ghost again, kind of, because both of them are still human-y people, but then there was like the roach, and then all of these other people from the different courts, who every now and then it would randomly be like, his blue hair, and I'd be like, his what? When did he have blue hair? It was difficult because there was just no real way to picture any of these characters, because I can't remember a description that was given to me once in book one of a really complicated man, so I just ended up making it up as I was going along, and then they'd throw random bits of information about me that I was supposed to remember from their description books ago, and I was like, nah, we're past that now, we're too late for that, we'll just ignore that. I did have a lot of questions as well as far as world building is concerned. Questions that don't necessarily need answering, but questions that just played on me. For instance, obviously like the fairy thing with knowing their names, that's not something that is sort of just in this series. Like, that's just kind of a fairy myth. But if that works, why don't their mothers all just control them? Because their mother must give them their name. So they know that name, so then why aren't they just controlling their children? Why at no point when Cardan was a feral child was Asher just like, whatever his real name is, just be a decent child, and then Cardan would just have to be a decent child? Like, why didn't that ever come up? Like, it just seems like a massive thing that you would think in every world where the name thing works. You'd think they'd be doing that. I know I'd be doing that. Like, why is nobody just controlling their children to be decent children? It could cause so many problems, and the fact that it's just never brought up, the fact that the parents could be doing this to their children, confuses me. Also things like, where are the islands in, you know, Earth? If they're in the same place as the mortal world, where are these islands? Are they just in the sea, like bits of the sea that we've never looked at before? Are they off like America? Are they off different parts of the world? Is there different things going on in different continents? Does Cardan rule over all of them, or just the ones on this specific bit? You know, maybe these things have been explained and I just haven't noticed them, but yeah, just little things that don't necessarily need explaining, but just like played on my mind whilst I was reading. The final thing I want to quickly talk about is the writing. The writing of this series, I struggle with it, like, massively. I think it's one of the reasons, well, it is the main reason why none of these books are ever 5 stars for me, and why I almost didn't continue the series, just because I really do not like the writing in them. The main issue is that it's in first person present tense, and I cannot stand first person present tense. It just never sits well with me. I did think towards the end of this book, like the second half, because there was so much happening, I wasn't noticing the tense as much, but every now and then I'd just pick up on it and it would pull me out of the story, because I'd be looking at it thinking, what, that's weird, and then think, oh, it's not supposed to be in past tense, this is present tense, and it would physically pull me out of what was happening, and I didn't particularly enjoy that. Also, the way that Jude as a character is kind of presented, I find that she seems really robotic, not so much in Queen of Nothing, but definitely in the series as a whole. Quite often she like underreacts to things, I find, you know, things are presented, things happen, you know, and instead of her kind of having emotions. It's like, I was sad. That's it. That's all you get. Like, I think my favourite in this book in particular was when she noticed all of the human bodies in the lady from the Court of Teeth, I think it is. All of the human bits she had in her fridge, and I think her only reaction was like, my stomach turned, and I was like, there's human remains in this lady's fridge that she's eating, and all you can think is, that makes me feel a bit sick. It was like, what? But that was even like one of the better times though. There's been times throughout the series, especially in like the first book I found, where big things would happen, and all we'd get from Jude was like, sad. And I know it's kind of supposed to be part of her character because she is kind of emotionless. She is an absolute psycho. That's kind of how she is. But it was also so frustrating because it made her seem so robotic, and I couldn't connect with her at all because of it. Like, I didn't feel like I was reading about a character. It felt like I was reading about a robot. I didn't enjoy that. Other little nitpicks I had with the writing throughout this was the beginning of Queen of Nothing. I almost DNF'd on like page 3 because of it. I went into it already on a bad foot thinking, you know, it's probably not going to be as good as the books I've just been reading. I don't expect it to be a 5-star read. And so when it started off with just as bad writing as I expected, I almost DNF'd it so quick. I'm glad I didn't, but oh my god, the beginning bit is like, you know those like cringy TV shows where, I don't know, they're in a high school and you've got the main girl and she's walking around and then she's, you know, got some inner monologue going on like, hi, my name's Tiffany and I go to this school and I study this, and then like another girl walks towards her and then there's like a freeze frame and then like the main character's monologue is like, this is my best friend Amanda and she's doing this and she's having these problems, and then somebody else approaches and we get another freeze frame and it's like, and this is Chad. Like that was how the beginning of the book read, and it was so annoying. It was just Jude being like, my name's Jude and this has happened to me and blah 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 for like a page, and then it was like, I went outside, and then it would like, this is Oak and Oak's been doing this and all of Oak's past, and then this is Vivi and Vivi's been doing it, and it went on for about 5 pages, and oh my god, it was so annoying. I know it was necessary to go back over everything that's happened, but it could have been done for a start as less of an info dump and secondly just not like that. It was so horribly annoying that I almost DNF'd on like page 3 because on the 3rd page of like freeze frame, this is Heather, I was like, I can't do this now. Thankfully that was just the beginning and it kind of weared off. I was kind of scared when they were in the camp and then all these other characters were brought in again, that we were going to start again. You know, I was concerned she was going to walk into the room as Taryn, and then as soon as Cardan was mentioned, it was going to be like, this is Cardan. And I was like, oh no, don't start again. And thankfully it didn't. Thankfully that was just a beginning of the book thing and we left that at the beginning of the book. Otherwise, I think I would have gone physically insane. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have too many nice things to say about the writing. Description-wise, I do like that. I do like the way that Holly describes things. I always kind of now associate like this series with Christmas because I'm always reading them around Christmas, and I do like the way I kind of feel sucked into this really fun magical world of all these different types of fairies, because I do really enjoy that kind of vibe. And I do think she does a good job of describing the world. Not necessarily the ins and outs of the actual world building, but she describes the setting very well. But unfortunately, other than that, I don't have many nice things to say about the writing. It is really, the writing is the reason why I dropped my rating. I ended up giving this a 4-star rating. I did consider giving it 4.5 stars, and then I dropped it back to 4 stars, mainly because for a start you can't give it 4.5 stars on Goodreads, and there was no way on earth I was giving it 5 stars. I did think it was the best book in the series. So to summarise, do I think the series is worth it? Do I think it's worth the hype? Do I think this book is worth the hype? Yes. If you've read the other books in the series, I would say this one's worth it. I've seen a lot of people say that they thought this was the worst of them, but I think that makes sense in the fact that, like, most people absolutely adored the first book. They thought it was, like, the best thing since sliced bread or whatever. I didn't like it at all, so it makes sense that the one that I like, the people who were saying they liked the first one didn't as much like the last one. But I would say, in my opinion, it is definitely worth reading. Do I think the series overall is worth the hype? No, not at all. I think it is a good series. It's not one I'd recommend as such. Or if I were to recommend it, I would start with, hey, this is a series if you like fairies. I personally didn't think it was that great, but you might like it. It isn't something that I'd rave and rant about, especially the first book, to be honest. I kind of want to reread it and seeing if, because I like the characters now, if I can read the first book and like it. But would I say it's the worst thing? No. Would I say was worth the amount of hype it got and people like really like praising it. No. Do I still think it's worth reading? Yes, if it's your kind of thing, and just maybe go into it not necessarily expecting it to be amazing, because I think that's what my problem was. I went into it with the bar set really high because everybody was hyping this book up expecting it to be amazing, and I was really disappointed. So yeah, maybe if you're going to read it, don't go in with your bar too high, because then if you love it, great. If you don't as much, you're not going to be overly disappointed. I would like to see more of these characters in the future. I don't know if we will. Like, if she continued the series, I'd absolutely read it. I don't think she will, which is a shame, because I quite like to see more of Cardan Greenbrier, but whatever. But yeah, that's the book of the trilogy over. So thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way to the very end. Please do tell me in the comments what you thought of this book if you've read it, and yeah, thank you again, and I will see you very soon. Bye.